there! Welcome to Skanky Productions. I'm Crown Grey's Cocon. Let's get into the video. Today's video we're going to be continuing with our film reviews series and we're going to be continuing with our look at different Disney films, and today we're looking at none other than Bambi, right, from 1942. So obviously don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and obviously don't forget to hit the bell button as well so you stay notified for whenever we have new videos coming out. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the actual video itself. However, we have to kind of lay out how we structured these film review videos. So first of all, we have the story of the story. Second of all, we have the story of the creator. Third of all, we have the story of the studio. Fourth of all, we have the themes and history. Fifth of all, we have the legacy. And sixth of all, we have any notable lines or notable effects within the film. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So we'll talk about the story of the story. So the story is based on a 1923 book called Bambi, Life in the Woods, and this was written by Felix Salten. So we'll talk about him a little bit later when we talk about the story of the creator. But for now, let's just dive into the actual plot of Bambi. So the film starts with a doe who's just referred in the film as mother, and she gives birth to a little fawn called Bambi. And it's said that one day he will grow up to become the prince of the forest. Yeah, so just like his dad, who's kind of an absentee father, like most deers are. So like his dad is the great prince of the forest, and so so Bambi will eventually take over from him. So everyone obviously loves Bambi, including all the other animals, and they address him as Prince. And very quickly on, he ends up befriending Thumper. So Thumper is the only real a bit of comedy relief that they have within the film. And also you have Flower, who is a skunk. And actually I thought that Flower was a girl when I first saw it and stuff, because the voice is very, sounds like a girl. But anyway, so they're all kind of playing about in the forest. And while they're playing about, this is where Bambi ends up coming into contact with Fawline, right? So Fawline is a female fawn, and they kind of play a game of like, well, not really kiss chase, but more like lick chase. So she licks him, and then they kind of like play with each other and stuff. But of course, Bambi is a very kind of like inquisitive and very innocent child, and his mum has to warn him about the dangers of going about, right? Especially when you're going out into the meadow, because there might be different dangers there, especially the hunters. So the hunters in the thing are referred to as man, right? So you don't ever see them, but it's just referred to as man. So while he's frolicking about in the fields, this is where he ends up meeting the Great Prince. And the Great Prince is actually his dad, but he doesn't realize it's his dad at this moment in time. So he just sees him as like some older deer. And the Great Prince sees man and warns everyone to escape before man has a chance to actually hit anyone with his gun. So now it's the next season, and obviously winter's come, so they're playing about in the ice, they're playing about in the snow, and Flower the skunk goes and hibernates. And obviously during winter there's a lack of food, so Bambi and his mum go out to look for some food, but at this point man shows up again. And this is where it's that classic scene where Bambi and his mum are trying to run away. Bambi manages to get away, but his mum not so lucky, right? And while Bambi's out kind of in the snow looking for her and is obviously all sad and stuff, this is when the Great Prince ends up showing up, and he says, "Your mum's not coming back, and also I'm your dad. Nice to meet you too." But anyway, so next year it skipped season again, right? So next year, Bambi is now a young stag, and the skunk, Flower the skunk, seems to have had some sort of sex change, because like their voice is like way deeper, and obviously Thumper as well was grown up. So while they're kind of going about and stuff, right, you have Friend Owl, right? So Friend Owl, he's kind of like a cranky old man. He's kind of like complaining about all the other like birds who are like tweeting and stuff. And this is where he warns the three young men about Twitterpation. So Twitterpation is not about getting cancelled, but what it is instead is about basically people falling in love, especially in the springtime. So all three of the young males say, it's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to end up floating on air and stuff. That's not going to happen. But of course, inevitably all three of them end up folding, right? So Flower folds, then Thumper folds, and then obviously Bambi ends up coming in contact with Fawline again, and she is now a fully grown doe. But Of course, the thing with deers is that, you know, they can't just have a normal like relationship and stuff. Yeah, obviously, like he as a stag has to fight for the right to be with the females. So this is where there's another stag that comes and they end up having like a fight and stuff, and the fight goes on for a while and stuff, right? But eventually, Bambi ends up winning, and then he ends up being with Fourline. However, at this point, Bambi ends up smelling the smell of smoke. And this is where the Great Prince warns that man has returned and he has more hunters with him. So again, you don't see the hunters, but you know, there's all kinds of like gunshots going off and stuff like on screen. And then also the hunters have their dogs with them as well. So it's kind of unrealistic. There's like a dozen like dogs at one point and they're all around Fourline, and Bambi managed to fight all of them off without getting ripped to shreds. He doesn't even have like a scratch on him. But then as he's escaping, he ends up getting shot and it kind of disables him for a bit. So during this time, you know, the humans are being very careless and ends up being a campfire, which then turns into a forest fire. So the whole forest ends up being ablaze. And this is when, you know, the Great Prince comes to Bambi and says, yo, dude, you need to get up. Yeah, I know you've been shot, but it's a thing where either you get up now or you're just going to be fried to death, right? So, you know, you just need to hurry up, get up, right? You know, so he gets up, they manage to escape, and all the other animals manage to escape as well. And this is where the final scene, it skips to two young fawns being born to Fourline, and obviously Bambi is the father, and the film ends with him now being the new Great Prince of the forest. So that explains the plot of Bambi, right? So that, and we've kind of covered the story of the story with regard to that. But now we're going to talk about the story of the creator. So Felix Salten, who was the author of the original book from 1923, he was an avid hunter. So it's a little bit hypocritical that he was a hunter and then, you know, then wrote a book about it, but maybe because he was a hunter, he had like first-hand experience with it, whatever. But it was also a thing where he was Austrian Jew, and obviously this is, you know, it's not a good time to be a Jew, right? So he wrote it as kind of an allegory for persecution against Jews and against persecution against other minorities in general. So this is why he wrote it, and we'll talk about like this a little bit later when we talk about like the themes in history. But anyway, that's why he wrote the book, right? So the book got translated, and then in 1933, he ended up selling the rights to it, yeah, for only $1,000. Again, I don't know what it is with people in those days, like all the like people writing short stories, just getting mugged off, like getting paid almost no money for it, wherever. But he ended up selling the rights to his story to Sidney Franklin. You know, so Sidney Franklin, he was a director at MGM, and Sidney Franklin wanted to make it into a live action film. However, obviously the fact that like it's the 1930s, right? So the you know, there's no CGI, the technology is just not there and stuff, right? So to make a whole feature length film where you've just got animals, and obviously just how are you gonna know, how are you gonna get them to like stick on the script? How are you gonna get a deer to talk to a rabbit? Like it's not possible, right? So as a result of that, Sidney Franklin, after a lot of experimentation, just was like, okay, we're going to sell the rights of this to Walt Disney. So Walt Disney ended up buying the rights to the film in April 1937. However, although Disney liked the story, right, it was a thing where obviously it was, as he said, too grim and too somber. And because it was aimed more at like an adult audience, it was a thing where they were like, well, we're going to need to change the actual storyline quite a lot. And also because like although they had drawn deers in Snow White, they wanted the animation for the deers in this to be a lot more realistic, yeah, and the animators at that point weren't really there, and lots of things were happening with like the Disney studios at this time. You know, you had obviously Snow White that had just come out, you had Pinocchio, you were working on Fantasia, so as a result Bambi ended up being shelved like kind of as an idea for a little bit of time. So in 1938, Walt Disney got together two writers. So this is Percy Pearce and this is Carl Fulberg. And he got them to work together on a storyline for Bambi. However, like we said, because lots of things were in flux at the time, although they had done the storyboards, production didn't actually start until August the 17th of 1939, right? And it took almost 11 months of 7 writers to come up with what the actual like a script for Bambi would be like. And the reason for this, yeah, as it's been described by some of the writers, there was like a million different tangents that they all went off, right? So there was meant to be a bit where Bambi knocks over an anthill, and then it kind of like, the story kind of like pivots toward talking to these ants. And then there's meant to be a thing with grasshoppers as well, where the grasshoppers are there. There's meant to be talking leaves. There's also meant to be a kind of like Laura and Hardy kind of like duo, where there's a squirrel and there's like a chipmunk and stuff, and they have like banter between each other and like kind of, well, so all that kind of stuff got completely shelved. And also as well, because Disney still wanted the story to be quite dark, he originally wanted Man to be a character, and he wanted Man to end up being burnt to death by his own fire, which obviously they cut out and stuff, yeah, because they was like, well, actually, let's just have Man completely off screen, and like, so you don't end up obviously seeing that. And then also with regard to the bunnies, right? So as we said in our video where we talked about Snow White, what Disney wanted, yeah, was for each of the dwarfs to have their own personalities. And a similar thing was going to be done with regard to the different bunnies. So there was meant to be 6 bunnies, and all of them were meant to have like their own kind of personalities. But what was decided instead was that we're going to scale back on that, and instead they were just going to have several bunnies that were there, but Thumper is the only one with like a proper name, and he's the only one who's like an actual like proper character and stuff, right? So all of this ends up explaining basically the story of the creator and all the kind of like creative processes that went into making Bambi. So originally the film was supposed to be 82 minutes long, right? But they end up cutting out 12 minutes of screen time, yeah, because they got rid of all these like extra things that didn't really add to the story and kind of took it too far away from what the original was. So talking about the story of the studio. So obviously the animators had experience drawing deers in Snow White. However, as it was described by them, they kind of looked like big sacks of flour, right? And it was a thing where they didn't actually want the deers to look like that. They wanted them to look very realistic. They wanted them to look like actual deers. So what they actually did is Disney set up a small zoo within the studio. So you had deers, you had rabbits, all these different things here. And also it encouraged the animators to go and visit LA Zoo, right? And this is in order to see the animals up close and to kind of like see their movements, see what they actually look like in detail, rather than kind of like, as you had with Snow White, kind of drawing the ideas that people have of what a deer should look like, right? However, although they've gone through all this process to make the animals look more realistic, it was a thing where there still had to be an element to which they had to be relatable. So much like we've said with Pinocchio, right? You can't have Pinocchio looking too much like a puppet, and you can't have Jiminy Cricket looking too much like a cricket. They had to do the original sketch for them, and then they had to make them more like human, like more cute, like kind of, So that's the same thing that they did with regard to animals in here, especially when the animal's a bit younger. So, you end up having baby-like features, right? So you end up having shorter snouts than they would in real life, and also much bigger eyes. And this kind of helps the characters to become relatable, for us to have empathy for them, right? If they just look like a rabbit, if they just look like a deer, etc., then it's more difficult for people to be able to have empathy towards them, especially for like little kids and stuff. They just will see it as that. And then also, like we said, although there are no humans that appear on screen, it was still a thing where they still used 2 human models in order to help with the ice skating scene. So obviously there's a scene where Bambi and Thumper are skating about on ice, and so they had 2 figure skaters who were doing the ice skating, right, while the animators looked at how like their movement was, etc. So when you see Bambi and Thumper on ice, how they're moving about is based off of how humans would move on the ice, right? Rather than just how an animal was, because obviously a rabbit's not going to be able to skate about like that, and obviously Bambi would he falls down in a kind of a cute way, but most animals wouldn't actually kind of fall in the same way and stuff. So basically wanted to again look like how humans would do ice skating and stuff. So now talk about the casting, right? Now, I don't know why they did this, but they had basically 3 voice actors for each of the 3 main characters, right? So for each character, like kind of like talk about Bambi, Thumper, and Flower, you have, a baby version, then there's like a little kid version, then there's a kind of like teenage version of all 3 of them. So I don't really know why I did that, because I think personally they probably could have just got like one actor for each, and then maybe have them do a bit more of a baby voice, and then like a bit more of a kind of little kid's voice, and then a bit more of like a teenage voice. I feel like they kind of could have pulled that off without needing to hire 9 actors to do like 3 roles. Yeah, but anyway, that's my take. So you had that, but in terms of like the casting, there wasn't really any notable people, right? So Bambi isn't voiced by anyone who is in anything else that's really significant. Talked about the so-called young adult thumper. This is voiced by Sam Edwards. So Sam Edwards, he's in Little House on the Prairie as like the banker or something like that, right? He's kind of a minor character, so not really worth talking about. And then talking about Sterling Holloway, right? So Sterling Holloway, he is the voice of Mr. Stork in Dumbo. He's the voice of the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. He's the voice of Car in The Jungle Book. He's the voice of Rockford the Mouse in Aristocats, and he's also the voice of Winnie the Pooh. So we spoke about him at length when we were talking about Dumbo, and yeah, he's kind of the only notable voice actor. And talking about the mole, for instance, who appears for like a little bit on screen. That is actually the voice of Percy Pierce. So, like we said, that's one of like the key writers for the story. So that's kind of it. That's the casting. You can look through the casting list, and it's not anyone who's like really appears in anything else, right? So you can kind of see why this was a very, very cheap film for Disney, right? So as we said in the video for Dumbo, it's the thing where, all of the best animators went to Bambi, and obviously you can see the difference of that. But it's the thing where everything else seemed to go to Dumbo, right? So all like the best voice actors, all the best like dialogue, and also as well, all the best songs as well. Like Bambi doesn't really have any real songs in it. Like there's not anything that's that notable. The studio, you can see why it's like such a cheap film and stuff, because I can't really see what they spent the money on other than like paying for like all like the really good animators. So now we're talking about the themes and the history, right? So as we said, the major theme, the whole reason why the book was set up in the first place, was to do with kind of an allegory about persecution, especially of Jews, but also of other minorities. So much in the same way as George Orwell, when he wrote Animal Farm, he could have just spoken about the Russian Revolution and like a critique of Stalin, like in human terms, but actually it is sometimes a lot more effective, having animals as like the metaphors for that. So the reason for that is because people, without realizing it, kind of get the message of like who you're trying to critique, but also as well it's more accessible to children, and so it's a way of kind of universalizing the message of it and stuff, right? So that's kind of why Felix Salten ended up doing it in that way. And it's the thing where Felix Salten, although he wrote it in 1923, at that time you had a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe, and especially in Germany and Austria. So he could see what was going to happen in Europe, right? So he's kind of given a warning about that. And actually, it's a thing where in 1936, his books end up being banned in Germany. Well, not just banned, burnt in Germany. And when you're having the Anschluss, between Germany and Austria in 1938, this is where basically he just packed his things and just went to Switzerland, and he lived there for the rest of the war. And he died in, I believe, October of 1945. And it's also something to note that this film came out in 1942, and by this point, America had finally joined World War II. So obviously, in a way, this kind of ties in with the war effort in a kind of like more indirect way and stuff. Yeah. So kind of getting people to see like the dangers of Nazism, even though the film, when you watch it, you don't really get that feel at all, because like because Disney changed the story of it so much away from what the original was. It's less clear what the original intent was, and so you end up kind of watching it and just thinking this is a story about this, right? But anyway, so you have that. Also as well, with regard to it, the other theme that you could say that was really notable is environmentalism, right? So again, similar to Dumbo, it's kind of like way ahead of its time in terms of getting humans to think about how they're interacting with nature, because the humans aren't even on screen throughout the film, but they are incredibly disruptive. Yeah, all of the animals are just living in peace. They're just going about their lives, and then all of a sudden, bang, 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 they're getting shot from all different places. You know, the whole place ends up going up in flames because the humans are too stupid to know how to build a proper campfire without burning everything. And yeah, so it's just carelessness, destructiveness, and kind of getting people to think about how they're actually kind of like looking after like things, yeah, and like, you know, being stewards of creation as such, right? So that's kind of a major theme that they had, and so again, it's way ahead of its time in that regard. And it's also quite ironic, I think, that obviously, like, you know, Sultan himself, he was an avid hunter, but maybe he wrote it because he had such experience with it, and so he was able to kind of relate to the destructiveness of humans when they go hunting and stuff. So anyway, that kind of talks about the kind of like themes and the history of the film. And now we're going to talk about the legacy. So obviously the legacy of the film was largely really positive, right? So first of all, it, like, you know, blew audiences away. It did incredibly well at the box office. So like we said, as far as I'm aware, this is the cheapest Disney film that was ever made and stuff. The budget for it is less than $900,000, and yet at the box office they end up making almost 3 million. Yeah, and then when you include all the different reissues that they had for the film, it adds up to almost $270 million. Yeah, that the film ended up making. So a roaring success. It's beaten only by Snow White and Pinocchio in terms of things. So although it's the cheapest film that Disney made, it's the third most profitable that they ever made. And on top of that as well, it was nominated, although it didn't win any Academy Awards. But yeah, it got 3 nominations for the Academy Awards. And here's the controversial thing. I don't like it. I don't like the story. It's boring. I was falling asleep at certain points. And I know that everyone can like really gasses up like the whole thing with like, you know, the mother, you know, the death of the mother and stuff. Maybe it's because I just don't care about tears. For Dumbo, I said like if you watch the baby mind scene and a tear doesn't like well up and stuff, you have no soul. Maybe I don't have a soul with regards to deers, yeah. Maybe it's because I like elephants and I don't really care about deers. I don't really care about people hunting deers and stuff. So maybe me watching it, I was like, okay, this is boring. They're just some deers and they go here and they go there. And oh yeah, now they're getting shot at. And then, oh yeah, now the thing's on fire. Oh, okay. Oh, they all survive. Oh, okay, cool. And that's kind of it. It's such a, like, compared to the other Disney films which we've analysed and which we will go on to analyse, the story of Bambi is very plain. The dialogue is very simple. Literally, like a little kid could watch Bambi and wouldn't miss a trick. Whereas for the other ones, you watch it and you kind of go, you watch it again as an adult and you go, oh, there's that. Oh, there's that. Bambi is just, you may as well just watch a David Attenborough documentary. I'll be real. It's just boring. That's my whole take on it. I don't understand why it's so successful. I don't understand anything to do why it's so significant. Yeah, I found it to be dead boring. And also as well, you can see that it's very much influenced at certain points by Fantasia. So not a knock on that, but it's a thing where certain bits of it is just music and things happening on screen, and that's calm, but at the same time doesn't really add to the story at all, and it doesn't really make the film more beautiful. It just is. That's my whole take on it. It's not, it looks beautiful to watch, but it's not entertainment. Yeah, like kind of like cinema has to be beauty on screen and it also has to be entertainment, right? That's what makes a good film in my eyes. But anyway, so that's kind of talked about the legacy of it. And now we're going to move on to the final bit, which is talking about the notable lines and notable effects. So first of all, we'll talk about the notable lines in it. There are some kind of funny moments in it, right? So first of all, you have this one.
He can call me a flower if he wants to. Pretty flower. Oh, gosh.
And then you have this one.
Hey! Hey! Stop that racket! Scat! Woo-hoo! There. That'll teach him.
And then finally you have this one, which I think, you know, the first levels are just too real, yeah. Like, kind of, my man just needs to, what's going on here, bro? Like, just look at this.
Oh.
It's just ridiculous, isn't it? So, anyway, that's going to talk about all the kind of like notable lines within this, right? And talk about the notable effects. There were two animators in particular who really kind of made this film what it was, right? So it was Maurice Day, and so Maurice Day went into a forest for several weeks out in Vermont, and he kind of saw like how a forest kind of looks for all like the different trees and the like valleys and like ravines and stuff, and like so that's why looking at Bambi, it's a very realistic forest. Yeah, when you compare it to Snow White, obviously there was bits of that where they tried to make it like impressionist and stuff. I understand that, but at the same time, it's like you look at Bambi and you feel like you're in a forest. Yeah, like it's very very realistic. And also as well, you had a Tyrus Wong, and he was a Chinese American who was really really revolutionary in like kind of how backgrounds were kind of laid out. So whereas before you would just have a very kind of like cluttered thing on screen, what he ended up doing is instead having a thing where the edges had a lot less detail and the center had a lot more detail. So when you're looking at what's on screen, your eyes are drawn immediately to the center, which is where the characters are, right? So rather than kind of just getting lost in like the undergrowth and stuff, your eyes and your attention is focused on the characters and what's actually happening, right? So that was really revolutionary. Both of them, like, really really great stuff. But that's essentially the end of our talk with regard to Bambi. So obviously, if you like that, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And also let me know in the comment section your thoughts on Bambi, whether you like it or not, whether you think I have a soul, whether, but yeah, and also as well, actually just say what your favorite Disney film is, yeah, because I'd be really interested to know that. And I think when I'm finished doing all these Disney films, I think I'm probably going to do like a kind of review on what my favorite one is, maybe like a ranking system. We'll think about something, right? But for next week, I had a debate about this because Disney did make some other films, yeah, during this period, yeah, from 1942 to 1946. But I'm skipping over some of the lesser ones because they're just not as interesting. They're not as culturally significant. Like, the whole point of me doing these film review things is talking about culturally significant films, yeah, not just every film that was ever done by these people. It's like films which have kind of entered somewhat into the psyche. So we're going to skip over some of the other ones. I've got their names on screen now. I can't even remember what they're called, right? But the next video we're going to be doing is Song of the South, right? Very controversial, lots of controversy with regard to that, but we're going to be covering that next time. So definitely stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, have a great day and bye.